Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Mythgard Academy. This is session number 20 in our discussion of The Name of the Rose. And tonight we get to see, we've seen some warm-up acts for the Inquisition before. Tonight we will get a chance to look at the Inquisition in action and see how that works. In particular, what we're going to be paying close attention to here tonight is Adso in his role as narrator and his sort of serving as intermediary and commentator on the Inquisition here as well. All right, so, okay. Oh, hang on. Before we start, a quick announcement. Just wanted to let everybody know that our space program has its booster pack special going again. What that means is that there are two different opportunities for you to try one of our space modules at less than half price. Normal cost for a 1 month class with us in our space program is $175. But if you've never tried space before, that's one way. You have the chance to try it for only $75. So 1 month, a whole month of class for only $75. And all you got to do is sign up for BlackBerry. Go to blackberry.signumuniversity.org, create an account, and you will get a booster pack coupon, which is basically it's a discount code for you to purchase a token. Space tokens are how people get classes, and you can get your first token for only $75 and take a class. So the other way that you can get a booster pack is you can refer somebody. So if you're in your BlackBerry account, which looks something like this, and you can see all of the wonderful registration forms for our upcoming moots, including this coming weekend here, just in a couple days in Houston, Texas for Tex Moot, and on the 26th of April for Willow Moot in Belgium. Looking forward to being back in Europe again. Anyway, so you can sign up for our events here, of course. But over here, this is my space column, and all you need to do is click the Get Referral Link button, and then so if you have a friend that you want to share space with, or you're thinking maybe it'd be fun to take a class together with somebody, which is always a great time, then you just copy this link. It's unique to you, and you send them that link, and they'll get to BlackBerry and sign up for it. And then when they buy their first token, then you get a bonus pack yourself. So anyway, that is how the booster pack works. So just wanted the booster pack special is running all month here in April, so I wanted to draw your attention to it. All right, back to the text. So just before we return to the Inquisition, a couple things about the tail end of the previous chapter. So you remember we've just discovered the dead body of poor Severinus, who was killed, remember, by the sun, moon, and stars, just, falling from the sky, by the orrery, the little, well, not planisphere, that's flat, but it's an orrery. It's a 3D planisphere. Anyway, so like this metal replica of the cosmos was just used to bludgeon poor Severinus to death. So this is William and Adso thinking about the book that Severinus had told them about. You'll recall that they had searched through all the books in Severinus's study there, his laboratory, and they did not find the Greek book that they were looking for, the secret book, the book which has been the cause of all the problems. William says, "No, now I remember. He said a strange book. Severinus was a man of learning, and for a man of learning, a book in Greek is not strange. Even if that scholar doesn't know Greek, he would at least recognize the alphabet. And a scholar wouldn't call a book in Arabic strange either. And a scholar wouldn't call a book in Arabic strange either, even if he doesn't know Arabic." He broke off. And what was an Arabic book doing in Severinus's laboratory? "But why should he have called an Arabic book strange?" says Adso. "This is the problem. If he called it strange, it was because it had an unusual appearance, unusual at least for him. who was an herbalist and not a librarian. And in libraries, it can happen that several ancient manuscripts are bound together, collecting in one volume various and curious texts, one in Greek, one in Aramaic, and one in Arabic, I cried, dazzled by this illumination. So the hideous discovery, hideous realization that William is now making is that he had the book in his hands. That he and Adso both looked at the book and didn't recognize it because it began in Arabic and they only looked at the first few pages. He, of course, William has many hard words, both for himself and for Adso. But yes, he realizes that it was there. Sorry, just laughing seeing Jackie complaining that we always start on time when she's on bedtime duty. Well, it is true, Jackie, that we're done with the rated R parts. So it would be okay. The rest of the book is comparatively family friendly. But notice that all of this hinges upon William's interpretation, his only belatedly accurate interpretation of what Severinus meant when he called it a strange book. At first, he seemed to take that word to mean only like he found a different book, a book that he wasn't expecting to find, right? And he thinks it's important and so goes to William. And of course it is. It seems like it is in fact the book that they've been looking for, that William is convinced all of this, all of the excitement, all of the murders have been about. Right. JJ says, at least as family friendly as gruesome murders can be. Well, but we're not actually no one will be murdered during this coming chapter. Just questioned, and no one will even get tortured. They'll just talk about torturing people a little bit, and talk about not torturing people. So really, all things considered, it's maybe not family friendly exactly, but anyway. I was trying. Anyway, but it is only now that he realizes that it wasn't just strange to him, but that it was genuinely strange. He is now realizing in retrospect that that word was more important than he originally thought that it was. Notice again, I keep saying that throughout this book, we keep getting example after example of like almost every different kind of interpretive situation, of relationship between signs and things and signs and signs. So many different circumstances. Here, the circumstance that we're given is one not even where a single word has two possible meanings, but where the meaning of a sentence differs based on the amount of emphasis that you put on a particular word. When he said it was a strange book, did he mean it was just a strange book, or did he mean it was a strange book, right? Just think about if you typed out the sentence that I just uttered, it would look pretty weird, right? It would be hard to understand if you didn't put any italics or something in it, right? That's precisely the kind of situation that Echo is sort of describing here, right? It is a bit like Good Morning. What a lot of things Severinus could potentially use strange for, right? And William is chiding himself because he took it for granted, right? He didn't think through carefully enough the potential significance of that word. And of course, he made what is for William in particular a classic blunder. For him, to him, an almost unforgivable blunder. Why did he overlook the book when they both held it in their hands? Because he thought he knew what he was supposed to find. Because he believed that he already had the answer. And he was not doing good inductive observations. He wasn't going ground up. He was going top down. He believed he was looking for a book in Greek. And so, seeing that this book was apparently in Arabic, he discarded it. And that, again, is the classic example, or the classic mistake, the mistake that others make and that he particularly tries to guard himself against. But it shows also how sort of normal that is, right? I mean, again, if you think of it, it's one thing to say like, oh, you should never take things for granted like that. But then again, you won't get very far in life if you don't take things like that for granted, actually, right? We do operate all the time on a baseline, on a pretty high baseline of assuming we know what people are talking about, right? That there are always possible second or third meanings to particular words or whatever, which we ignore, and don't take the time to think through, weigh carefully, and decide whether or not to accept it or dismiss it, right? Yes, Fencing Frog, he made the data fit his theory rather than working from the data. Exactly. He is right that he could have realized that this was the book, because what his conclusions had led him to was the premise that the book was there, and he was right. And since he knew that the book was there, he shouldn't have been so hasty. He shouldn't have jumped to conclusions. But again, that he did so. And of course, the circumstances, it's one thing to say he should have taken his time, but he couldn't take his time. He was in a rush. In fact, circumstances rushed him. He didn't have forever to leaf through every single book in Severinus's laboratory. I mean, it was like the middle of the debate. He still had to go back and give evidence, right? So he did not have an infinite amount of time. And again, that's how things normally are, right? We're always making assumptions. We have to make assumptions. This is why I was joking about this yesterday. It's April 2nd today, and I was joking last night on last night's broadcast that I always dislike April 1st. I don't like the April Fool's Day thing because I'm always taken in, and this is exactly, by the way, why I'm always taken in. Exactly what happened to William here. Because when I'm reading news stories, I try to minimize the amount of time that I spend looking at news stories. And I don't have time to ask the additional question, do I think this is just a joke, or is this like a serious headline? I'm already, trying to be responsible and doing critical readings of news headlines that I see. I don't need to add another layer to that particular critical puzzle, right? That's why I'm always a little bit annoyed by April Fool's Day. Yes, Jackie, exactly. There are many people who think there's a Silmarillion movie in the works after yesterday. Yes, that was I saw that one. But anyway. See, Mighty Felix, that's just mean. Mighty Felix says Oxford put out an April Fool's article about them nixing their classics degree. That's just mean because that is wholly plausible and will probably happen at some time soon. Like, the real April Fool's joke would have been saying that, like, you know, they've decided to cancel, like, all STEM research and pour all the money into the classics. That would have been a really good April Fool's joke. It's just cruel, right? You're just taunting the people whose program you probably are going to cut before long. But anyway, yeah. Anyhow, so as I say, these are, this is a sort of a dramatization of this kind of interpretive situation where William has made a mistake, but despite his own hard words on himself. And it is certainly true. Like, he is not wrong that he should not have made that mistake. But of course, it's totally understandable that he did. And again, it emphasizes that it's the kind of mistake that we ourselves also often make, or at least open ourselves up to. And one has to be careful in interpreting things, because you never know when the Inquisition is going to show up, as it's going to in just a moment. Now, but right before, last slide, I think, before we get to the Inquisition. This is, watch Adso as narrator here. But there's no use weeping, he concluded. This is William, of course. If Malachi took it, he has already replaced it in the library, and we would find it only if we knew how to enter the Finis Africae. If Benno took it, he must have assumed that sooner or later I would have the suspicion I did have and would return to the laboratory, or he wouldn't have acted in such haste, and so he must be hiding. And the one place where he has not hidden surely is the one where we would look for him immediately, namely his cell. Therefore, let's go back to the chapter house and see if during the interrogation the cellarer says anything useful. We went back to the chapter. We would have done better to go to Benno's cell, because, as we were to learn later, our young friend did not have such a high opinion of William, and had not thought he would go back to the laboratory so quickly. So, thinking he was not being sought from that quarter, he had gone straight to his cell to hide the book. But I will tell of this later. In the meantime, dramatic and disturbing events took place, enough to make anyone forget about the mysterious book. And though we did not forget it, we were engaged by other urgent tasks, connected with the mission that William, after all, was supposed to fulfill. Yes. Maureen, I have to admit that nobody expects the Avignonese Inquisition just does not roll off the tongue anything like as well. Though, of course, this Inquisition is not exactly Spanish. Okay. So there are three layers I want to draw attention to. First is what William does. William's mind is working very fast now, right? And he makes another mistake immediately. And the mistake that he makes, Fencing Frog, just as you say, is overestimating his opponent, which can be as dangerous, as he points out, as underestimating him. Yeah, absolutely. He does overestimate Benno, and, or rather, as Adso says, our young friend Benno did not have such a high opinion of William. So he doesn't exactly overestimate, he sort of overestimates Benno. But what he really overestimates is Benno's estimation of him, right? Yes. So here is William conjecturing about what will happen, about what Benno will do. And he's wrong about it. Benno does, in fact, go back to his cell and hide the book in his sleeping pallet, which is surely the first place that they would have looked for it had they gone there, right? So Benno was not cunning. It's a congenial error that William makes in overestimating. But there is an element of arrogance, right, in the mistake that William makes. I say it's congenial because he's thinking more highly of Benno than Benno perhaps deserves. But it's also, there is arrogance here, right? He is so confident that that there's no point even in looking. That's how confident he is. And it turns out he's wrong, right? Had they just done the due diligence of like, well, let's check Benno's room. Even if he were like, it probably won't be there, but let's just check, and then he would have found it. But he didn't, because he was so confident in his own interpretation, not exactly of events, but of Benno's character, intelligence, what he's projecting. He's projecting onto Benno a like parallel thought process to his own, right? But what I wanted to mostly focus on here is Adso's commentary and the two different layers of it, two different layers of his intervention here as narrator. First, he just starts off by just telling what they did. We went back to the chapter, and now he starts commenting. We would have done better to go to Benno's cell, because, as we were to learn later, our young friend did not have such a high opinion of William and had not thought he would go back to the laboratory so quickly, so, thinking he was not being sought from that quarter, he had gone straight to his cell to hide the book. Now, on the one hand, this is Adso cheating, right? Adso didn't figure this out or anything, right? This is Adso telling us, in retrospect, what actually had happened. He is being consistent in describing to us contemporary events, right? That is, first, like historically speaking, in the actual chronology of the events, William makes this conclusion. Benno does, in fact, meanwhile, Benno is in fact hiding it in a really obvious hiding place in his cell. And so he's just telling us what's happening in the order in which those things happened. And yet what he's doing is stepping outside the chronology of his own knowledge. He's stepping outside of his point of view within the frame of the narrative. And he's speaking from the point of view of the knowledge that he had later on. This is not the first time he's done this. But it seems to me that he's doing it more often as the story moves forward. It is a little bit like breaking the fourth wall, Gerald. Yes. And it's different from how he has been doing that. He will sometimes speak in the voice of Adso, the elderly monk, right? Why am I blanking on the name of his abbey? Where he's living and writing this thing? Milk. Yeah, Milk. Thanks. So sometimes we do hear the voice of the elderly monk of Milk, who is narrating this story, right? But most of the time, those have seemed to me to be thinking about, he'll comment on the story that he's telling or how he's telling the story. Like when he stepped outside it to reflect on the similarities of things in the, in the uncomfortable triad, right? Yes, he's talking more like an omniscient first-person narrator than he used to do. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, Bricktails. This isn't just old man Adso regretting his past. Yeah, yeah, exactly. This is a different kind of relationship with the story. This is him drawing attention to the fact that he is arranging the telling. He's not just, he said many times, I'm going to tell you everything, how I saw it and how I felt it and how I, everything that I experienced at the time. And he's doing that. But now he's adding this extra layer. And when he does this, it distances us from the story. Do you see what I mean by that? When we are following along, hearing Adso talk, hearing Adso describe what he's seeing, right? It's just Adso as point of view character, right? And he is the filter through which we are receiving the whole thing. But it puts us at one remove from the action, right? We're there alongside Adso, watching everything happen, hearing what people say, including Adso himself, right? But we're just one step removed from that. When the voice that we're hearing is not the immediate voice of Adso, like the young Adso, right? It's not just the immediate experience. When we're reminded about the existence of the old monk of milk, then we're pushed out an extra layer. It's reminding us that it's a story, Maureen. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Instead of just being secondhand viewers of the action, we are reminded that we are being third-hand viewers at a significant chronological remove. That's what I mean by distancing. It's very much like when in a TV show or a film, right? Again, it's sort of like the breaking of the fourth wall. It's like when you return to, it's like masterpiece theater, right? Beginning with the dude sitting in the chair, in the armchair, right? Telling you about the story you're about to hear. The more we return to him, the more distant we're going to be. The more time we are hearing his voice telling us that we are hearing a story or supplying things that are outside the actual flow of the experience of the story, the less immediate the story is going to be to us. She doesn't get eaten by the eels at this time. Exactly, Calvin. That's right. JJ was thinking of the same thing. And of course, you'll notice that in the Princess Bride film, being quoted from there, that moment is designed on purpose to distance the grandkid, from the action, right? We get that interjection because he was too close. He was looking anxious. And so we get the interjection there. And one of the effects of it is it's not just the spoiler. Don't worry, she's not going to die. It is the interruption of the action, which the Princess Bride film brilliantly replicates for us in the sudden shift back to the kid's bedroom and the reminder that we are watching somebody listen to a story. We're not just watching the story itself. Yes. Sorry, Mighty Felix, you're right. He was a little concerned. It's not the same thing. I agree. So that's one interesting effect. Now the question is, as we force ourselves, having been pushed back this step, if we force ourselves to step back one step more, the interesting thing then becomes to ask ourselves, why does Umberto Eco have Adso do this? Because, of course, we're not listening to an old monk from Melk tell this story either. In fact, we're listening to an Italian intellectual, right, make up a story about, tell us a story and put it in the mouth of, just like we're not in the bedroom listening to the grandfather tell his grandson the story, we're watching a movie about that, right? Yeah, good. Calvin is all over it. Watch what he does next then, having pushed us back this step. But I will tell of this later. In the meantime, dramatic and disturbing events took place, enough to make anyone forget about the mysterious book. And though we did not forget it, we were engaged by other urgent tasks connected with the mission that William, after all, was supposed to fulfill. He's doing teasers? Now, it's not the first time he's done this, right? But it's the two things together that get me. Had he just said, imagine skipping that middle paragraph. William says, therefore, let's go back to the chapter house and see if during the interrogation the cellarer says anything useful. In the meantime, dramatic and disturbing events took place, enough to make anyone forget about the mysterious book. And though we did not forget it, we were engaged, right? Okay, that sounds like he has hinted before. Like he is remembering what's going to happen and he's trying to restrain himself. This is still the intervention of the elderly Adso's voice. But it doesn't break the action, but it comes out. But in fact, we don't skip that middle paragraph. First, we get pushed back into realizing, and then he does this thing. In the meantime, dramatic and disturbing events took place. When you juxtapose, I will tell of this later, with, in the meantime, dramatic and disturbing events took place, the latter begins to sound like a, the final chapter in a, 19th century serial novel or something like that, right? Yeah, Mighty Felix, you're right about the frame narrative. We're going to come back to the frame narrative. We're going to come back to the frame narrative at the end, but yeah. In other places where Adso has given us teasers of this kind, which he's often done at the end of a day, it sounded, I don't know what, spontaneous, almost naive. Adso, the narrator, was peeking through, but he was peeking through in what felt like a burst of honest exuberance. Like it was almost like a sort of confession that he couldn't wait to tell us what was the big things that were going to happen later, but he knows it's not proper to do it. So, but he let some of that enthusiasm bleed through, right? And doesn't stop himself from hinting, but it felt, anyway, to me, that's kind of the atmosphere that it seemed to establish. But here, after we're pushed back that first step, this all begins to sound contrived. In the meantime, dramatic and disturbing events took place, enough to make anyone forget about the mysterious book. And though we did not forget it, we were engaged by other urgent tasks. I want to capitalize that phrase. Now I'm starting to feel manipulated. This sounds like showmanship on Adso's part, which I didn't think was part of the plan. part of the program. And it leads me to wonder, hang on a second. It changes my relationship with the narrator. He is not just sharing with me what happened. This is not just he's not just going to tell me this story because this was an important thing that he experienced. No, he's going for an effect. It's what it sounds like anyway. And that's different, right? That puts the whole thing into a different context. Feanaro, that is an interesting correlation. He says, to me, it feels like this change in narrative style correlates with Adso spending less time on the events of the mystery and more on his internal struggles with faith and love. Well, it is true, isn't it, that Adso has become the hero of this story in ways that might have surprised us back in the first few chapters. Remember the whole lost horse incident when Adso was doing his, beautiful, innocent Dr. Watsoning, right, at the start? Things have changed since then. The narrative has changed since then. Feanaro, I agree. One of the major ways in which it's changed is that the story, Adso's choice to write this story, Adso's narration of the story, has become more and more transparently a way for him to process his own thoughts and his own experience. And yes, it definitely has an impact on how we view the story. These paragraphs are important, in a sense, in the context of the Inquisition that's about to come. Because the Inquisition is all about interpreting the framework of the interpretive framework into which one places statements, right? And Adso's narration has just done that with the entire story right before we now get an object lesson in this sort of interpretive thing. Okay. We begin the Inquisition, Bernard's Inquisition of Remigio. Remigio, I should soften the G because it's Church Latin. Anyway, we begin with Adso's interpretation of things, right? If the hapless Remigio was in the grip of his own fear, Bernard Guy, for his part, knew how to transform his victim's fear into terror. He did not speak. While all were now expecting him to begin the interrogation, he kept his hands on the papers he had before him, pretending to arrange them, but absently. His gaze was really fixed on the accused, and it was a gaze in which hypocritical indulgence, as if to say, never fear, you are in the hands of a fraternal assembly that can only want your good, mixed with icy irony, as if to say, you do not yet know what your good is, and I will shortly tell you, and merciless severity, as if to say, but in any case, I am your judge here, and you are in my power. All things that the cellarer already knew, but which the judge's silence and delay served to make him feel more deeply, so that as he became more and more humiliated, his uneasiness would be transformed into desperation instead of relaxation, and he would belong entirely to the judge, soft wax in his hands. It does sound rather terrifying, doesn't it, Jackie? This is a wonderful description. You notice what Adso does here? First of all, what is he seeing? The huge central sentence of this paragraph is describing Bernard's gaze. The gaze that he directs at Remigio. And yeah, exactly. He adds a lot of interpretation. Look at the different layers of interpretation he adds. First, he gives one layer of interpretation by describing it. It was a gaze in which hypocritical indulgence mixed with icy irony and merciless severity. That's the actual sentence. Right? His gaze was really fixed on the accused, and it was a gaze in which hypocritical indulgence mixed with icy irony and merciless severity. So there are those three nouns, those three qualities that he identifies separately in the one gaze. Gerald says that gaze must take a lot of practice. Yes. I think actually Adso kind of implies that, right? That Bernard Guy I don't know if he practices it in the mirror or what. But yeah. Anyway, so Bernard's looking for Adso to interpret his gaze, his looking at Remigio, as containing those three things. And notice each one of those three things, each one of those three nouns has an adjective too. So first was just the nouns, right? In his gaze, he sees indulgence, irony, and severity. But not just any indulgence, irony, and severity. He sees hypocritical indulgence. So it's like, it's indulgence, but only seems to be indulgent, right? It's a ploy. And there's irony, but it's icy irony. And there's severity, and it is merciless severity. But wait, he goes further than that, way further than that. Not only does he identify, now with some significant specificity, these three different elements of this one gaze, but he literally interprets it. He translates it. What does each element of that one single gaze actually communicate? What messages is he delivering to Remigio through each of these three aspects of this one gaze? And he gives it in words. He puts words not in his mouth, but in his eyes, right? As if to say, never fear, you are in the hands of a fraternal assembly that can only want your good. That's what hypocritical indulgence sounds like. Icy irony sounds like, you do not yet know what your good is, and I will shortly tell you. And merciless severity sounds like, but in any case, I am your judge here, and you are in my power. Yeah, isn't the structure of this long sentence gorgeous, Jackie? This is a great sentence. This is a great sentence. Now, notice, by the way, the repetition, the as if to say, and the parentheses, right? Adso is not being, like, dishonest here. It's as if, right? He makes it clear that this is his interpretation of the look that Bernard Guy is giving to Remigio here, right? Bernard hasn't said any of these things. This is just Adso's impression, right? He begins with a thing, the gaze of Bernard. And then he takes that gaze as a sign. It means a lot. There's a lot of meaning in that gaze. And he draws it out into words and words in this really deep and complex sentence. Right? And that would have been interesting enough if we hadn't just had our attention drawn back to Adso, the storyteller, right? I find myself in this paragraph, I can't help but think like, but hang on, did teenage Adso think this at the time? Am I back into Adso, young Adso point of view? Or is this old Adso reflecting back and saying, I now perceive that this is what that gaze meant? I don't even know. I can't even tell anymore which one it is. I don't know. It doesn't exactly matter. I'm just, my own interpretive relationship with the story has been a little bit rumpled. Right? I'm a little bit, and again, this only seems to me important because the interpretive framework is, again, it's what this chapter is all about. And so I'm feeling, I don't know exactly where I stand, but I'm kind of feeling like it's important that I should. It might not be, but it's tough. Let's keep going. You escaped the seductions of heresy, Bernard mocked. Or rather, you escaped the investigation of those who had determined to discover the heresy and uproot it. And the good Cluniac monks believed they were performing an act of charity in receiving you and those like you. But changing habit is not enough to erase from the soul the evil of heretical depravity. And so we are here now to find out what lurks in the recesses of your impenitent soul and what you did before arriving at this holy place. My soul is innocent, and I do not know what you mean when you speak of heretical depravity, the cellarer said cautiously. You see, Bernard cried, addressing the other judges, they're all alike. When one of them is arrested, he faces judgment as if his conscience were at peace and without remorse, and they do not realize this is the most obvious sign of their guilt, because a righteous man on trial is uneasy. This is challenging, right? On the one hand, we have been repeatedly been given a way to understand what's going on here, right? I mean, we see that Bernard is clearly one of the biggest examples. If doing that top-down analysis, right, the one where you start off by knowing what the answer is and then you interpret events in order to show how they prove the answer that you already knew was true. If you, that kind of top-down analysis we've seen. Bernard is an aggressive example of that. And based on everything we've heard and seen from Bernard, especially in the little, teaser of a witch trial that we got the night before with Salvatore and the girl, we surely came into this expecting this, right? Expecting exactly this kind of performance from him. That he was going to come into this Inquisition already knowing the answer, and that he is just going to be looking for evidence to support the answer that he knows to be true. Right? And we see that. That's exactly what we see. What we expected to see is precisely what we see. That make you nervous? Anyway, so yeah, but I mean, look at that. Look at that. What were Remigio's options? Exactly. He says he's innocent. What was he going to say? He's guilty? Is that going to be better? I mean, it clearly doesn't matter what he says, right? Yeah, this is troubling. A little while later, Bernard says, I believe it is the Roman Church, one holy and apostolic, governed by the Pope and his bishops. So I believe, the cellarer said. Admirable shrewdness, the Inquisitor cried. Admirable cleverness de dicto. You all heard him. He means to say he believes that I believe in this church, and he evades the requirement of saying what he believes in. But we know well these weasel tricks. Let us come to the point. Do you believe that the sacraments were instituted by our Lord? That to do true penance you must confess to the servants of God? That the Roman Church has the power to loosen and to bind on this earth that which will be bound and loosened in heaven? Should I not believe that? I did not ask what you should believe, but what you do believe. Gerald, I agree. Like William said of the girl earlier, Remigio is already burnt flesh. Yes, we know he's not getting out of this, right? The odds of Remigio being found not guilty in this trial are approximately 0, right? This is no, I mean, we know this. We know this. Again, we come into the scene knowing that. You see the joke? I'm afraid the joke's potentially on us. You see the situation that Echo has put us in here? We are sitting here righteously tut-tutting at Bernard. Why? Why? What makes us really uncomfortable about Bernard? Because he's got his mind made up in advance about exactly what Remigio is. But what have we done? We've come into this scene with our minds made up about what Bernard is, haven't we? We're pretty sure we know how to read this. I will tell you, I myself was shocked at what a different experience it was reading this chapter a second time. I read it, and on my first reading, I was appalled, just as I expected to be appalled. Right? I knew it was going to be appalling, and wouldn't you know it, I was appalled. And I found myself every time, everything he said, I was like, how? It was really frustrating. How can he do that? Poor Remigio. There's nothing he can say. No matter how Remigio tries to protest his innocence. I mean, look at that. Right here. He, Bernard, asserts an orthodox truth. And the cellarer says, so I believe. And then that confession is taken as evidence against him. And it's very frustrating. Do you notice something, though? Round about here, second time through, is where I began to notice some things. this Remigio does not in fact give straight answers. Should I not believe that? Notice he didn't say. He could have said, I believe that too. Right? Or like Bernard asks, do you believe the following list of things? That's a yes or no question. But Remigio doesn't answer yes or no. Right? And it's certainly true. He knows Bernard. He doesn't just know Bernard might be trapping him. He knows Bernard is trapping him. Pause for a moment. That is, pause the Inquisition of Remigio for the aside from Adso on the torture of Salvatore. Salvatore comes in and he's obviously been tortured. He can barely walk. He's obviously been tortured. And Adso says to William, Bernard has tortured him. Not at all, William answered. An inquisitor never tortures. The custody of the defendant's body is always entrusted to the secular arm. But it's the same thing, I said. Not in the least. It isn't the same thing for the inquisitor, whose hands remain clean, or for the accused, who, when the inquisitor arrives, suddenly finds support in him, an easing of his sufferings, and so he opens his heart. I looked at my master. You're jesting, I said, aghast. Do these seem things to jest about? William replied. Gerald, it is kind of like a mob boss ordering a hit, but keeping his hands clean. Yes, a bit like that. The thing that, of course, struck me here are two things. First, the parallel, right? Bernard is accusing Remigio of using weasel tricks to try to evade a straight answer. He believes that Remigio is trying to speak the truth, because lying is hard, right? It requires acting and presence of mind, and so not to mention is also in itself a sin. And even a heretic would very likely feel that to forswear what he believes is wrong, right? So he accuses Remigio of weasel tricks. That was Bernard's phrase for what he's doing. Yes, inquisitors are priests. Yeah, they are. Yes, bad cop, good priest is exactly the way there. Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, you'll notice the way in which the situation that William is describing parallels confession. You can confess to the priest, right? Anyway, it's another reason for the shift between the secular. That's why Bernard has those archers with him. That's why he brought guards who are not priests, who are not part of the Dominican order, right? They're just guards. Yeah, exactly, Fencing Frog. The idea is it's an aggressive form of confession. Yeah, I think that's a good characteristic. Anyway, but back to what I was saying before. Bernard has been accusing Remigio of weasel tricks, of circumlocutions, in order to deceive while technically telling the truth, right? what Bernard has said has been going on here. And then so the first thing that we get in this little aside between William and Adso is Adso's own, the pointing out by William of the disquieting parallel between the weasel tricks that the heretics, according to Bernard, are wont to play in order to try to deceive and, do false confessions while still, telling the truth technically. The parallels between that and the tricks that the Inquisitors themselves play, where he tortures somebody, but he hasn't technically tortured him any more than the guy is deceived, but he's not technically told a lie, right? But the second thing, in addition to that parallel, is how appalled Adso is by this. You're jesting, I said, aghast. But it's the same thing. Adso wants plain dealing. William is not jesting. William does not find this stuff funny at all, says the ex-Inquisitor, right, who left the Inquisition in order to avoid this kind of thing. But this is an important aside, an interesting aside anyway. Hang on a second. Before we go on, though, let's go back and read it again. Just these two passages. Stop for a minute. Let's read like William. Don't read like Bernard. What if you don't know what's going on here? That is, what if we just go on the evidence? What if we don't come into this scene believing that we already know what we're going to be watching? If you reread the whole scene, try as an exercise. Just, I'm not going to pretend that that is going to be easy to make this reading congenial to you, to your spirit. But reread the scene without the knowledge that you believe that you have of how Bernard is going to twist the truth. Could Bernard be right? Does the evidence, does the data we are given support the interpretation that Bernard is correct? In all of his interactions, in all of his exclamations about Remigio's answers. When I read it the second time, as I say, I was shocked. The first time I was 100% on Remigio's side. In the sense that I, knew how horrible Bernard was. Not to mention the fact that I was also predisposed to think ill of the Inquisition, right? So I was ready for what I received, and by golly, I received it. And I found my indignation built up at every turn. When I reread it the second time, it dawned on me that if I were to go into it even entertaining the possibility that Bernard could be correct in his assessment of Remigio's answers, that reading works perfectly, just as well. If Remigio had been a heretic, a Dulcinian heretic, who was determined from the beginning, who was in fact coached in advance to evade the questioning of an inquisitor. That's exactly how it would have gone. And in fact, Adso, the narrator, points that out. This was the thing that blew me away. It wasn't just that the whole scene could be interpreted a different way. Like that was interesting. Like I was like, whoa, it blew me away. But I wasn't like surprised by that. What surprised me was that when I'd read it the first time, I didn't even pay any attention to all the clues that Adso is giving. From the very beginning, Adso is interrupting and telling us. Remigio's answers seemed like they were repeated by rote. It sounded like he was pronouncing a formula. He says that. Yeah, exactly. I had confirmation bias the first time. The top-down interpretation, right? Look at the second passage, I think, is clearer. Again, if we assume even the possibility, if we are open to the possibility that Bernard is correct in his assessment of Remigio, you can see Remigio's answers are squirrely. It is true that a heretic who is trying to evade, so I believe, Bernard is onto him. I believe what? What you just said? I believe that you believe that it is the Roman Church, one holy, apostolic, and governed by the Pope. Like, he didn't technically say, I believe that too. He has chosen his words carefully so that they are ambiguous. So that you can certainly take it as saying, I believe the same thing that you do, but he didn't actually say that. He just said, I believe in what you said, which could be interpreted as, I believe that you believe that. And it's even more conspicuous the second time. Yes or no, do you believe these things? Should I not believe it? Why didn't he say yes or no? Right? Yeah, well, Eric, that's essentially what he's doing. He just write up a whole profession of faith and ask Remigio to read it and say he believes everything in it. But that's what this paragraph is doing, essentially, right? And he's not just, it's not just a generic, profession of faith. This is, Bernard, that is focusing in on the things that the Dulcinian heretics specifically do not believe, right? The things that were rejected by the Dulcinians. Now, I not only understand if you are resistant to the reading that Bernard is right all along, because Bernard is a jerk. He's horrible. And he's an inquisitor, and the Inquisition is pretty horrible. So not only will I be understanding if you are totally on Remigio's side, but I'll think better of you for it. But in the end, isn't he kind of right, actually? Is Remigio's soul, how did it go? Does it contain the evil of heretical depravity? Are there, in fact, dark things lurking in the recesses of his impenitent soul? Yeah, actually. Yes. He is a Dulcinian heretic. Yeah, Biotrom, it's also true that Salvatore was in fact going to try to conjure a demon with a, a witchcraft spell. It's kind of true. Yeah. Watch what happens as we move forward. This is Malachi talking about the librarian, talking about the letters that Remigio gave him. It's the exposure of the letters, which is the turning point in the trial. I placed them in the most inaccessible of the secret rooms of the library, and after that I forgot this matter, until this morning, when the Lord Inquisitor mentioned the papers to me, and then I fetched them and handed them over to him. The abbot, frowning, took the floor. Why did you not inform me of this agreement of yours with the cellarer? The library is not intended to house things belonging to the monks. The abbot had made it clear that the abbey had no connection with this business. Notice how, here, this is just a little bit of an aside, on Adso, the narrator. Look at how quick he is. Remember the previous... So, this has been a busy day today, right? Day 5, busy day. We start with the whole debate, right, between the Pope's emissaries and the Emperor's emissaries about poverty. And then we interrupt that for a trip to Severinus's laboratory to find his corpse. And then we return for the full Inquisition of Remigio, right? So, busy day. In the first part of the day, remember the thing that we were emphasizing as we were reading through and discussing the debate about poverty is that we were looking at how the things that people are saying, actually saying, is not always, in fact, it's often not what's really important. That often what they're actually trying to communicate, the point they're actually making, may be in fact quite different from the thing that they're saying. But you can figure out the thing that they're getting at by listening to the thing that they're saying and placing it in its context. Look at Adso just like doing that here. Why did the abbot frown, take the floor, and yell at Malachi here? The library is not intended to house things belonging to the monks. Adso immediately twigs to this. The abbot had made it clear that the abbey had no connection with this business. Adso knows exactly why he's doing it. It has nothing to do with Malachi, and it has no... Right? Look how savvy Adso is in interpreting these things. I love this. This William is awesome at like sick burns, right? Oh man, this is my favorite one. I love this. Is like the geekiest burn that he does the whole visit of Bernard. Bernard asks him about what were the, like he said, Remigio said he overheard William and Severinus talking about some documents. William returned his gaze. He did misunderstand me, in fact. We were referring to a copy of the treatise on canine hydrophobia by Ayub al-Ruhawi, a remarkably erudite book that you must surely know of by reputation, and which must often have been of great use to you. Hydrophobia, Ayub says, may be recognized by 25 evident signs. Bernard, who belonged to the order of the Dominicans, the Domini Canes, the Lord's dogs, did not consider it opportune to start another battle. So the matters were extraneous to the case under discussion, he said rapidly, and the trial continued. The joke by William here is so subtle that Umberto Eco does an unusual thing and explains the joke, right? I mean, as you guys know, there have been a whole lot of medieval things, like medieval stuff, that Umberto Eco has not explained, right? Inside jokes and references and things like that. He explains this one because it's so obscure, but he wants to make sure that people don't miss it, right? The Dominicanes, the Lord's dogs, was a nickname of the Dominican order. And remember, the Dominicans and the Franciscans are rivals, and that's part of the whole the whole pissing match earlier in the morning, right, during the poverty debate between the Dominican. It's why they ended up fist fighting, right, was really because of the whole Dominican Franciscan rivalry thing more than anything else. So William says, oh no, we were talking about a treatise on canine hydrophobia. We were talking about mad dogs. And this learned Arab gave 25 evident signs by which rabid dogs might be recognized and distinguished from other dogs. You can see, I mean, holy cow, right? What an immensely clever and subtle way of accusing Bernard of being not only like mocking him as a dog, but indicating that he's a rabid dog. Oh man, it is. It's top shelf. And, but wait, there's more. Is he lying? I mean, he's just making this up. I mean, it's a pretty quick quip, right? But the thing is, it's not. It's not exactly a lie. The Arabic book. That is, in fact, the book they were talking about. Right? Oh, come on. Oh, man. This is just so good. So good. Couldn't omit this. But again, talk about saying one thing and meaning another, right? When you can talk about one thing, which is officially unrelated, and so you can say one thing, by saying that thing, give a deadly insult to the person who knows full well that you've insulted him personally, both generally as a Dominican and personally as a mad Dominican. But like they can't prove it or even rise to it. Come on. So good. So good. But you'll also remember that Adso was a little uncomfortable about William's use of irony. Remember, Adso thinks you're supposed to like put up warning signs before you use irony, right? This is genius. This is so clever by William. But it's also dangerous. The reason you're supposed to, put up a warning sign is that you can actually deceive if you care about that sort of thing, right? William is manipulating language deliberately and in such a way both to be hurtful and to defend himself, to prevent any consequences of his, sort of cruel joke here, right? Now, again, don't get me wrong, it's hilarious, and I'm all on William's side, but Adso's not totally wrong to be uncomfortable with this kind of thing. And for this moment to be embedded in the middle of this Inquisition, I think is interesting. But anyway, okay. Here's Adso again, telling us all about it. This is, by the way, after Bernard has come back around to the murders and connecting the murders to the heresy of Remigio. What Bernard wanted was clear. Without the slightest interest in knowing who had killed the other monks, he wanted only to show that Remigio somehow shared the ideas propounded by the emperor's theologians, the poverty stuff. And once he had shown the connection between those ideas, which were also those of the chapter of Perugia, that is the good guys, the Franciscans, right? And the ideas of the Fraticelli and the Dulcinians, heretics, and had shown that one man in that abbey subscribed to all those heresies and had been the author of many crimes, he would thus have dealt a truly mortal blow to his adversaries. I looked at William and saw that he had understood but could do nothing, even though he had foreseen it all. I looked at the abbot and saw his face was grim. He was realizing belatedly that he too had been drawn into a trap, and that his own authority as mediator was crumbling, now that he was going to appear to be lord of a place where all the evils of the century had chosen to assemble. What Bernard accomplishes is complete victory. He is playing a deep, deep game here. He's not just verbally sparring with Remigio and bringing about his confession without even torturing him. Remigio, that is. Oh, sorry. He could have just led with that. He could easily have taken him into custody and hauled him off to be tortured, right? Not only did he get the confession out of Remigio that he was looking for, believing he would find, convinced was certainly the truth, but he has managed to absolutely crush the resistance of the Franciscans to what the Pope is arguing, to the Pope's demands, and hideously undermine the abbot, who was trying to maintain his neutrality and his authority over both sides while they were in his abbey in any case. Exactly. Bernard and the Avignonese have humiliated the Minorites and the hosting abbey. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He does it all. He gets it all. And notice, all of this paragraph reflects Adso's. He's explaining what this all meant. He gets it. Little Adso's getting good at this. He's now tracking with everything. As for the cellarer, by now he no longer knew of what crime he might still try to proclaim his innocence. But perhaps at that moment he was incapable of any calculation. The cry that escaped his throat was the cry of his soul, and in it and with it he was releasing years of long and secret remorse. Or rather, after a life of uncertainties, enthusiasms and disappointments, cowardice and betrayal, faced with the ineluctability of his ruin, he decided to profess the faith of his youth, no longer asking himself whether it was right or wrong, but as if to prove to himself that he was capable of some faith. "Yes, it is true," he shouted. "I was with Dulcino, and I shared in his crimes, his license," and he goes on. It goes on and on and on. Right, his confession. Fencing Frog, that's really true. He says, always keep your objective in mind. William, meanwhile, has been distracted by trying to solve a series of murders. A noble goal, but not the big picture. Yeah, it's very true. He himself has seemed a little conscious of it. I mean, remember, even the comment that Adso made was a little bit of a poke at William, right? And though we did not forget it, we were engaged by other urgent tasks, connected with the mission that William, after all, was supposed to fulfill. And won't. And will fail at, right? We're reminded of that right before we go into it. Yeah. No, the murder mystery is a total side quest. He's only here for this, to represent the Emperor's interests in this debate. And while he's here, these murders are happening, and he's like, oh yeah, I'll look into it. This was the whole point. And he's failed. Totally. completely been defeated by Bernard. Now, I'm not saying that the murders aren't the main point of interest in the story. But as far as William's actual, like, job is concerned, they were the side quest. So how do we interpret Remigio now? It is, of course, possible that he's not actually guilty. That he is confessing, he's been cornered and denying it isn't doing any good. So he confesses. He's giving up. But the things he says, is this true? Adso believes it. Adso's interpretation here is not just an interpretation of his words, but an interpretation of his intention. He, Remigio, decided to profess the faith of his youth, no longer asking himself whether it was right or wrong, but as if to prove to himself that he was capable of some faith. Calvin says, are we expected to trust Adso? Yeah, sure. But I would remind you, this is one of the things about his distancing us from the story, right? The more he distances us from the story, the more he invites us to wonder. And I agree. No, I'm not. I don't mean to suggest, Maureen, that there was anything William could have done. I don't. Especially not the way that things have unfolded. I mean, Salvatore's spell was not under William's control. And once that happened, things had already started to go bad. Maybe he could, I mean, he knew about Remigio. He knew Remigio was a Dulcinian. We knew that already. Salvatore told us that. Told William that. So, like, William might have done something about that. Had William exposed that to the abbot, and the abbot had taken some action, this scene could have been avoided. They wouldn't have come up as, in an Inquisition before Bernard Guy. So, and wait, why didn't he? Why didn't William report them? Well, he didn't report them because he was using his knowledge of their past as a lever to get them to talk about the murders and what they knew. Right? Did we know this? We knew it about Salvatore. We knew for a fact that Salvatore was with Dolcino. We knew that he and Remigio came together. We knew that they were old acquaintances. Yeah. I think Adso, at least, is asking us to believe that, though we have every reason, and very good reason, to object to Bernard's methods and his whole interpretive framework, I think he's not wrong. That, in fact, this Inquisition from one end to the next seems like it was a masterpiece by Bernard. Not just politically, that is explicit. That the way he turns this for the political argument is unstoppable, is a tour de force. But even as an inquisitor, when we read his confessions and hear from his own mouth his own story, and then we go back and you read again his early answers for which Bernard has given him such a hard time, and it sounds like Bernard is being so mean to him, he's not wrong, I think. I think that Remigio was being squirrely, playing weasel tricks, and had been coached on how to do it. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. As Calvin says, it sounds ridiculous until it's true. Yeah. Just like the accusation of witchcraft against Salvatore. Sounds absurd. Except we knew in advance it was true. Right? Jackie, I'm sure the girl isn't a witch. I'm sure she's innocent. But I can't help but think the only suspected person, she's the only suspected person for which we are not given evidence that she's actually guilty. And can we trust the source? Would Adso tell us? Would he himself notice? Would he believe it enough? As I said before, we have our minds made up that she's innocent. In part because Adso has his mind made up that she's innocent. Oh, I'm sure she is. She probably is. Really. I mean, odds are she's not a witch. But how can we know? Betsy Frog says she bewitched Adso. See, that's just what Ubertino would say, right? Yeah. Would old Adso be convinced she was innocent? Apparently. I don't think we've seen old Adso breaking ranks with young Adso on that point. But see, if he were so convinced of it at the time that he refused to hear, see, or notice anything against her, would he have it to tell? I don't know. He hasn't made any comments to the contrary. So it seems that he's still and again, it's probably right. He's probably right. But again, it's such a fascinating, the way the Inquisition scenes are just brilliant by Umberto Eco. Because surely there is nobody in the whole story, probably nobody in any story about the Middle Ages, that we are ready to pile on faster and harder than an inquisitor, right? Not a nice, friendly, repentant ex-inquisitor like Brother William, right? But an inquisitor doing inquisitor things. And yet, Umberto Eco has carefully, fascinatingly, kind of indicted us, right? Or led us to indict ourselves. He leads us as readers into hypocrisy. As we say, oh, that's horrible. That he would just, there's nothing that guy can say to prove that he's innocent because he's just so convinced that he's horrible and wrong and bad in all ways. Except that's exactly how we look at the Inquisitors. It's amazing. It's amazing. That's not like, I'm not saying that Umberto is like pro-Inquisitor. I'm just saying it's amazing. Is all I'm saying. Here's William's commentary later. His whole body trembling, he rubbed his hands over his habit as if he wanted to cleanse them of the blood he was recalling. This is Remigio. The glutton has become pure again, William said to me. But is this purity? I asked, horrified. There must be some other kind as well, William said. But however it is, it always frightens me. What terrifies you most in purity? I asked. Haste, William answered. Okay, now I chose this slide for an unusual reason, and that's because I was hoping that you guys could explain it to me. I find William's commentary here very abstruse. Seeing him rubbing his hands as if he wanted to cleanse them of the blood he was recalling. He's just been recalling how he included, how the Dulcinians were slaughtering people. The glutton has become pure again, William said to me. Yeah, Judy, you're right. If we believe Adso, if we even suspect Adso is hiding evidence, then we can't prove that the woman was good or bad. Notice how that's never come up again. Never come up. The woman, her guilt and innocence have almost dropped from the story. He's going to mention her again, and William's going to say, forget about her again. But as far as her guilt or innocence, anyway, but I need your help with this. William says the glutton has become pure again. So, the idea of being a sinner. I think the glutton is Remigio. Right? I think so. I mean, it's possible it's Bernard, but I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is that he hasn't done anything. I mean, he won, right? But the parallel here, so a sinner becoming pure again, that's what absolution is, right? So when you've sinned and you confess your sins and you're given absolution, then you've been cleansed from your sin. You become pure again. That's, by the way, that's why you're not supposed to take communion if you're not confessed, right? Anyway, you have to become pure again. So the glutton has become pure again. And what has just happened is Remigio has just made his confession. He's just admitted all of the things that he did in his youth. So, yes, he's finally being open about his beliefs. So, William seems to me to be comparing his state right now, Remigio's state right now, to the state of one who has confessed and been absolved of his sins. First, that's a little peculiar, since although he did in fact confess, he has not in fact been absolved. Nor is it the kind of confession in question, right? When you confess your sins, you're supposed to be contrite about them. To be sorry and to repent from them, which is not, in fact, that's why he's not Remigio has not been absolved, right? Because he's not suggested any contrition for his previous sins. In fact, he seems to be sort of re-embracing them. And so William's statement that he's become pure again seems to be the purity of his belief. So it's paralleled, I think, to confession and absolution, but he's not stating that he's been, he doesn't mean it literally. I think he means he's becoming, Jocelyn says, don't you have to do penance to be cleansed of the sin? Yes, penance, Jocelyn, strictly speaking, penance is a way that you demonstrate contrition, right? You say, I confess that I did these sins and I'm very sorry that I did them. I repent, I turn away from doing them. And the priest then essentially says, if that's true, right? If you turn away from them, then you will do these other things, right? You will perform these acts of contrition. You will perform these acts of penance. It's not a punishment. It's a way, like, I will do these unpleasant, difficult, or even painful things. I will embrace doing those things that I really don't want to do, because that's how, that is the level of conviction I am showing about how much I repent of them. So penance is required, but it's not just part of the contrition. Like, it is the contrition. Like, it's the vehicle for it. Confession, contrition, absolution is the pattern. Exactly. It's part of the repentance. It's not payment for the sin. You're not paying off the sin. You're not being punished for the sin. Again, it's part of demonstrating the contrition. Anyway, but again, he's not contrite and he's not being absolved. So there's another way of reading William's statement here. Pure, not in the sense of being not sinful, not in the sense of being absolved, but in the sense that his sin is pure now. Exactly. Pure dedication to his heresy. The glutton has become pure again, not in the sense of ceasing to be a glutton, but in the sense of now being a pure glutton instead of a, I don't know what, closet glutton, right? Or intermittent glutton or something like that. And yes, he is an unalloyed glutton. Now, the question seems obvious to be asked, right? Not a hypocritical glutton, Eric, exactly. But why gluttony? Why is he comparing it to gluttony? Of all the sins, why gluttony? I don't know. I mean, was he guilty of gluttony? Yeah, but why pick that out of all of the sins that Remigio just confessed? But anyway, I'm not even going to worry about the gluttony thing. So Adso misunderstands this, but is this purity? Like, he's like, surely you can't actually mean he's just like been absolved. Right? He's like, this is not what purity looks like. Even Adso, he's an amateur, but he understands that, right? To which William replies, there must be some other kind as well. Other kind of what? Purity? I think so. There must be some other kind of purity. So he's saying, no, Adso, not the purity you're thinking of. Not like moral purity. Not spiritual purity. In the sense of, again, sin washed away. There must be some other kind of purity. I think. Okay. But however it is, it always frightens me. What terrifies you most in purity? I asked, says Adso, still confused. Haste, William answered. So there are different kinds of purity. There are multiple kinds of purity, William says. But however it is, it always frightens me. William says all kinds of purity frighten him. Purity from sin and purity of sin. So both the one who is pure from sin and the one who is wholly dedicated to his sin, wholly unrepentant, pure in that sense. Both kinds frighten him. Now, this makes more sense if we think about it in terms of the two people he's looking at, right? Remigio and Bernard. Bernard is pure in the other sense, or at least claims to be, right? It always frightens me, purity. And what terrifies him in purity is haste. Being sure you know the truth, Calvin. Yeah, that's a really good way of thinking about it. I think that's right. I think that's right. Purity. Don't be hasty. Zeal untempered by reason. Yes. Remember. So, okay. The world's a complicated place, right? Are the motives of anyone totally pure? Either kind of purity? And if you think they are, especially your own, then maybe you're being hasty. You know, like an example of being hasty might be, leaping to the assumption that somebody is wrong just because he's a horrible, evil inquisitor. Right? That might be an example of hastiness, perhaps. Or, assuming that somebody isn't a witch just because she looks innocent and is awful pretty. Right? Sorry, Jack. I'm teasing you, Jack. I'm sure she's not a witch. I feel, I'm confident. I'm confident. Anyway, haste. And remember that what happened yesterday, lots of things happened yesterday in the world of the book, but maybe it's 2 days ago, whatever. Remember Adso's whole dilemma? Adso's whole dilemma is anything pure. Can you know for sure anything? How can you tell the difference between heresy and orthodoxy? What's the difference between pure, rightful love and wicked, sinful desire? Which got into the uncomfortable triad, you'll remember. So, he spent a couple of days, his conversation with Ubertino and then his reflections upon his carnal experience with the not witch. And he, haste. Haste, William says, is terrifying. And Adso has been learning not to be hasty. He wished for haste But he did, that is Adso, did at least see that haste was problematic. Right? Yeah. Yeah. All right. It's late. I'm over time. I should let you guys go. We got almost all the way through the Inquisition. That was kind of my goal for the day. We're within 1 or 2 slides, I think, of my highest aspiration for the evening. So, Leo, let's be hasty here and adjourn to next time, when we shall surely, he says hastily, finish this day, and do, I think, I want to say, because at the end of the 5th day, let's see, I think I wanted, oh yeah, Matins is short. Let's do the first 2. Oh, 2 short. The chapters are so short. Hey, okay, so let's read the first 3. So we'll read 5 chapters for next time because they're short. So we'll read up to what we plan to discuss, be prepared to discuss up to, but not including terse of day 6. Terrifying haste, I know. All right, and yeah, we're getting awful close to the end of the book here. Okay, very good. Thanks everybody for joining me, and I will see you guys later. Bye now.